I'm 82 years old, and I want to tell you something I learned too late. Something no one ever sat me down and said when I was young. For most of my life, I believed being a good woman meant being useful, needed, available. I believed love was measured by how much of myself I gave away. I was wrong. I spent 45 years of my life trying to be everything for everyone else. Not because anyone forced me, but because that's what I was taught. Be patient. Be understanding. Don't ask for too much. Don't take up too much space. So I learned to make myself smaller. I got married young. That's what people did back then. I was told a good partner was enough. That if I did my part, life would work out. So I did my part. I cooked. I cleaned. I organized everyone's lives. I supported dreams that weren't mine. And every time I felt something missing inside me, I told myself it was selfish to want more. At 38, something inside me woke up. I wanted to go back to school. I loved literature. I loved ideas. I wanted to teach. I remember saying it out loud, quietly, like a secret. And I remember the answer. Now isn't the right time. We needed the money. The kids needed me. There would be time later. So I waited. Waiting feels responsible. Waiting feels mature. But waiting slowly teaches you to disappear. Years passed. At 57, I thought maybe this was finally my moment. Life had changed. Some responsibilities were gone. But something always came up. Someone always needed me. And I asked myself the same question I always did. How can I think about myself now? So I waited again. I wasn't unhappy. That's the dangerous part. I loved my family. I had good days. But there was a quiet voice that never went away. Late at night, in small moments of silence. Is this all there is? I ignored it for decades. Everything changed when my partner died. Suddenly, there was no one left to take care of. No one left to organize my life around. And for the first time, I was terrified. Not just because I was alone, but because I realized I didn't know who I was. I had spent my entire adult life being someone's something. A wife, a mother, a helper, but never just me. The first year after his death felt empty. I woke up with nowhere to go, nothing to do, no one expecting anything from me, and I didn't know what to do with that freedom. Then, about a year later, I found something, an old letter, something he wrote before we were married. In it, he described me as curious, intelligent, full of questions. He wrote about what he believed I would become. I cried when I read it because I didn't recognize that woman anymore. I realized something painful. I didn't lose myself all at once. I buried myself slowly. Every time I said later, every time I chose peace over truth, every time I convinced myself sacrifice was the same as love. I wasn't being selfless. I was disappearing. We're taught a beautiful lie that giving everything makes us good, that wanting something for yourself makes you selfish. But no one tells you the truth. You can't pour from an empty cup. You can't love others when you're angry at yourself. You can't give your whole life away and expect to still recognize yourself at the end. At 76, something in me snapped. I realized there was no more later. This was it. So I did something terrifying. I chose myself. I enrolled in classes, subjects I had loved my entire life. I was the oldest person in the room. I didn't belong there. And for the first time in decades, I felt alive. I started traveling. Not far, not fancy, just places I had always wanted to see. And then something even harder. I learned to say no. When my children called with expectations, I said no. When friends invited me to things I didn't want, I said no. And the world didn't end. People adjusted, and I felt lighter than I had ever felt. Now, at 82, I finally know who I am. Not someone's role, not someone's obligation. I enjoy my own company. I read what I want. I go where I want. I say yes when I mean yes, and no when I don't. But here's the part that still hurts. I regret the 45 years I spent shrinking myself, believing my life was something to earn. I can't get those years back. So if you're listening to this, hear me clearly. You are not selfish for wanting more. You are not wrong for having dreams. You do not need permission to live your life. That permission will never come. Life is not a rehearsal. This is the only one you get. And every day you live for everyone else is a day you don't live for yourself. I have lived my best years at the end of my life, and I only wish I had started sooner. You still can, but only if you stop waiting. Because waiting has a cost no one talks about. It doesn't scream. It doesn't warn you. It just quietly steals time. 1 year becomes 5. 5 becomes 20. And suddenly, your life feels like something that happened to you, not something you chose. I used to believe there would be a moment when everything calmed down, when the kids were grown, when the bills were lighter, when people needed me less. That moment never came. Life doesn't slow down and tap you on the shoulder. It just keeps moving. We tell ourselves comforting lies. I'll do it next year, after this phase, when things settle. But things don't settle. They just change shape. And if you don't choose yourself, you get carried along by everyone else's needs. Looking back now, I can see how often I abandoned myself. Not in dramatic ways, but in small, daily decisions. Staying quiet to keep the peace. Saying yes when my body said no. Laughing when something hurt. I thought I was being strong. I was just afraid. Afraid of disappointing people. Afraid of being seen as difficult. Afraid of being alone. So I made myself easy to live with and hard to recognize. No one tells you this. Being needed can become a prison. People get used to you always being available, always flexible, always understanding. And the moment you stop, they call it selfish. The first time I chose myself, my hands were shaking. Saying no felt wrong, unnatural, like breaking a rule I had lived by my entire life. But something surprising happened. Nothing collapsed. Some people were uncomfortable. Some were confused. A few were disappointed. But I survived. And more importantly, I started to breathe again. That's when I learned the difference between being kind and being invisible. Kindness has boundaries. Disappearing does not. I wish someone had told me this when I was younger. You don't owe your entire life to anyone. Not to your family. Not to your job. Not to your past choices. Love should not require self-erasure. I meet women now who remind me of myself. Always tired. Always apologizing. Always waiting. They think there will be time later. I want to shake them. Not out of anger. Out of fear. Because one day, you wake up and realize you've lived more years behind you than ahead of you. And that's when regret gets loud. Regret doesn't come from mistakes. It comes from silence. From all the things you never tried. All the times you stayed quiet. all the dreams you kept postponing. If you're listening to this and thinking this feels familiar, that's not an accident. That's your life asking to be lived. You don't need to change everything overnight. You just need to stop lying to yourself. Stop calling exhaustion strength. Stop calling sacrifice love. Stop calling fear responsibility. Ask yourself one honest question. If nothing changes, will I be okay with this life? I wasn't. And that's why, even late, I chose differently. And yes, I lost time, but I gained myself. If you take anything from my story, take this. Don't wait until life forces you to choose. Choose now. Your life is already happening.